hello, and welcome to Best for Women Live. I am so glad to have you here today. Joining me is Roxanne Francis. She's a renowned speaker. She is a trainer. She's the CEO of Francis Psychotherapy, and I am so excited to have her, which is Wellness at Work. Now, if you haven't had a chance to meet her before, I am delighted to introduce you because she is such a phenomenal woman. And here she is joining us now. Welcome, Roxanne.
Hi, Brooke. How are you?
I am so well, my friend. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see
It
you.
is so good to see you too. I know you and I don't often actually get a chance to
I
talk. We live
I
through
know.
voice notes.
I know, totally. This is great.
It is really great. I'm so excited to have you here with me today. We are going to dig into some awesome topics, I know. But before we get there, do you mind taking a moment to just introduce yourself to everyone?
Oh gosh. Okay, yeah, okay, yes, fine, I will. My name is Roxanne Francis, and my most important jobs are mother to two tiny humans. Well, they're not so tiny anymore. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I am a wife to one incredible man and been married for a couple of decades. And outside of that, I am a registered social worker and psychotherapist, and I run a group psychotherapy practice, and I am an organizational consultant. I consult to various organizations on all things related to mental wellness at work, psychological safety, equity, and inclusion, as well as I mentor and support therapists who are in the field, and I teach a course in the master's program at the University of Toronto. So that's
Okay, we're going to start with the fact that your boys are not tiny humans anymore. I've been
me.
loving watching them. One of them went through a growth spurt, clearly. We mostly see them from the back.
Yes,
I know that's, but it's part of setting boundaries, which is we're going to dig
yes,
into. And I'm like, hang on a minute.
they're growing for sure.
Now, you do a lot, and interestingly, I was actually wrote about this today in my newsletter. This idea of people who do a lot,
Hmm.
but what a lot of people don't see from the outside is that it's not as exhausting as it looks
Hmm.
because of A, clarity and unity in what you do,
Hmm.
and B, setting boundaries and
Boundaries.
calendarizing.
Hmm.
So maybe let's start there, and then let's sort of weave that into what that looks like for those who are employed or in leadership roles.
Hmm. So I am a stickler when it comes to calendar management, and also with boundaries and time. People hear about what I do and they say, I'm exhausted just hearing about it, right? And yes, it's busy, I'm not gonna lie, but I have to be mindful around the time that I spend on things. I was just saying to someone yesterday that work will fill the time you give it. If you have a half an hour to do something, you're gonna get those two important things done. If you have 5 hours to do something, you're going to fill that 5 hours because there's always going to be more to do. So you have to be mindful about the amount of time that you have, and you're going to prioritize where that, in relation to that. Delegate as much as possible if you have people you can delegate to. And delegation isn't always about, you know, having a team or having an assistant or having people who report to you. You can delegate in your household. You can, ask your sister to babysit. You can ask your partner to unpack the dishwasher. You can get your kids to do their own laundry so that you are not burnt out and overwhelmed and always feeling like you're running out of time. Um,
Oh, can we pause right
yes.
there? Because I think that's so important. So you've touched on two things. One of them is sharing the work.
Yes.
And I'll give another example because oftentimes I talk about for myself the idea of peer leadership. You may not be a people manager, right? You may not be responsible for other people in the organization, but that doesn't mean you can't be a leader
Right.
in the organization. And sometimes it can be as simple as, listen, I've been working on this project. It's really important for me. Can I get your help to proofread it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
part of delegation because that's one of the steps that needs to be done. Otherwise, you need to take time away from it in order to re-see it. And
Right.
so there's an idea of sharing responsibility, but it can be much even broader than that.
Mm-hmm.
If you've joined a committee, for example, and not taking on all the work, even
Right.
though you're super excited about all the
Mm-hmm.
topics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just at work. And then you started touching on things that can happen at
Yeah.
home with sharing the work. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so oftentimes we feel like I'm very passionate about this thing, or I'm the only one who can do this thing, right? You know, I enjoy cooking. It's where it's my happy place. But if you follow me along, you know that my kids are growing massive afros. And yesterday I was tending to one of them, and it was getting late, and dinner was going to be behind. And so even though I like to just do my thing in the kitchen, I said to my partner, "Hey, I need you to make such and such for me. Do I need to give you instructions?" And he goes, "No, I got it." And so otherwise, I probably would have just sat there and have been so consumed with, oh no, dinner's going to be late because I'm doing this thing. I'm the only one. Oftentimes we feel like we're the only one. We need to let that go. Other people might not be able to do the thing in the same way that we might, but they can do it, right? You can get your cousins to host, Christmas dinner. It does not have to be you. You can order Christmas dinner if that's something that's financially available to you. It does not have to be everything from scratch, right? Sometimes we need to let go of this idea of perfection or I'm the only one, because that is a surefire way to burn out. We can delegate responsibilities or share the work, as you so lovely put it, right? I taught my boys to do their own laundry when they were 6 years old, because I've only got two hands,
Yeah.
right? And it also helps them with self-esteem, feeling like there's something that they can do and they can contribute. Um, Calling people in, calling your friends in. I have a group of friends where if a family is in crisis, we rally around and we're like, okay, we're bringing dinner on Monday. Someone else is bringing dinner on Tuesday. Another person's bringing dinner on Wednesday. It's really, really important to be able to share the work so that you do not feel spread thin.
Oh, okay, I want to give an example and then I want to touch on
Hmm.
something that I heard. So in our house, we have two laundry hampers. One that is for anything that can go in the dryer, and the other one is for anything that cannot.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
Ooh.
so this just eliminated the his and hers laundry, because
Yes.
now he's got things that he doesn't want to go in the dryer, right? The nice
Mm-hmm.
collared dress shirts, whatever it looks like. So
Mm-hmm.
now when, his hamper that he's accountable for is the one that can go in the
Yes.
dryer, because that's something that he knows how to do. He's always done his own laundry. And
Yes.
then the things that get hung up go in the other
Right.
hamper. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible for hanging it up, but we both do folding and
Yes.
putting away.
Yes. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
You got to share the work.
Yeah, but give some parameters around it, because if it was
Exactly.
just laundry with one laundry bin, the next thing you know, the nice top goes in the dryer.
Yes.
There's tears, right?
Right.
So no, we set up some boundaries, physical
Mm-hmm.
boundaries, two hampers, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to point out that I heard was this idea of community.
Yes.
Yes. So let's rally around the
Yes.
family. There's a group of us
Yes.
who care for each other. I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing you're not necessarily family, but you've
No.
become
Yeah.
family through community.
Mm-hmm. It, that's, and it's really important because again, there's this idea, particularly in our Western world, not necessarily just in North America, but in our Western world, where we tend to value this individual type of culture, right? And that is really not how we thrive as people. We thrive in community, right? When you're alone, you feel alone. You feel like I'm messing up. I can't do it. What's wrong with me? I should be able to. It causes a lot more stress. And actually, it's I believe it's the nugget for poor mental health, not
Mm.
having community. And so when you have community, you can share the load, you can share the stress. Other people pour into you. You're not expected to have all the answers. Um, if there are youngsters in your life, there are people, I have three phone numbers on the fridge, and my kids know if things go left, I can call these three people,
Mm.
right? If the first
Mm-hmm.
person doesn't answer, the second person might. If the second person doesn't answer, then the third person might.
Yeah,
So having them be aware of community as well.
yeah.
We certainly can't do this alone, and we shouldn't expect ourselves
I've
to.
had interesting conversations about this with a friend of mine, and the idea that almost like there's certain places where you tend to find community, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Western
Mm-hmm.
culture, so you find them through
Yeah.
church, right?
Yes.
And this
Yes.
is one a lot of people are familiar with. Not everyone partakes or is comfortable, but I've also found that there's community in
Yes.
fitness. Yeah.
Yes.
right? The yoga studio probably brings a
Mm-hmm.
lot of images to mind. Soccer moms bring a lot of
Mm-hmm.
images to mind. But there's another one where there's community at work,
Yeah.
which is the implementation of what is the acronym is ERG, Employee Resource
Mm-hmm.
Group. Have you had experience with that in some of the training or the consulting work you've done?
Yes, I often speak to employee resource groups. We talk about, we do a lot of equity work. Sometimes I go in and I do what I call a listening circle, where people come in and they talk about some of the things that they feel like they can't speak about more broadly or openly at work. And it's a place where they can unpack. And sometimes I might report themes to the decision makers, or I might offer ways that they can help them get through some of their challenges at work. Um, but yes, community at work is huge. For some people, it's the only way that they're able to get through what's going on
Mm,
at work, right? If we climb up and we feel like we have to do things alone, the emotional load, the emotional toll at work can become
yeah,
significant. For some people, it becomes unbearable.
yeah.
Um, I've had my own situation when I was an employee where I was carrying a huge burden, and it took two of my colleagues to say, "Hey, are you okay?" And
Mm,
for me to actually recognize I needed to go on stress leave. Like I could not recognize it within myself. And so what happens in community is not only do we share the load, but we reflect, or what's the best way to say this? We often find out the most about ourselves in community because they're able to reflect what's going on with us,
yeah.
right? It's one of the reasons that therapy is so powerful. It might just be a community of two people, but there is that reflection, right? And so if you don't have community, you're just looking at yourself with your own eyes and you can't see much that way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I want to say out loud because you know I'm a coach, and coaching and therapy are not the same things.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some positive outcomes around
100%.
this concept of community. So there's many topics, and in fact, often I'll have clients who will come to me with a challenge that will present itself, and I'll say, you know what, I'm not the right person to talk to you about this. I
Mm-hmm.
know who is,
Mm-hmm.
and very glad to have you as part of my network because you are
Thank
one of my
you.
referral sources. And so I just wanted to sort of say that out loud for those of you who are listening. But therapy is something that is oftentimes people, there's an accessibility challenge, I'll
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yes,
So the idea
definitely.
of making physical time to go to an appointment and how do
Right,
you accomplish that?
right.
The
Yes,
cost of therapy and how
100%.
does that look like? And so of course it's different for every person. And we recognize on this call, both you and I, that there are people who are in a position where they have benefits from an
Yes.
employer. And then, of course, there are people who are in a leadership role, and I want to get into this because it's different. The stress of being a leader can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes be different than the stress of being an individual
Yes.
contributor. And then you have people who are a leader, like yourself, who are also in an executive alone role,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right, of being accountable for running a whole
Yes.
company and may actually not be in a position where you have a benefits program. It might just
Mm-hmm.
be an out-of-pocket expense. So,
Mm-hmm.
so recognizing there is a broad
Yes.
spectrum. So with that as sort of our table painted,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about benefits and what you've seen as sort of either, um, you know, any trends that you're seeing, I guess is maybe my question.
Unfortunately, the largest trend that I see is that people don't use their benefits.
Okay.
It's this thing where um, if they need glasses, they'll use their benefits. If, you know, someone has to go to the hospital and they need a private room or a semi-private room, or if they need a prescription filled, they'll use their benefits. Most benefits I find are used for prescriptions or going to the dentist. Outside of that, a lot of benefits go unused when it comes to massages, although a lot of people are picking up on that these days. Um, Things like, orthotics for your feet, going to the chiropractor, getting your hearing checked,
Mm-hmm.
um, going to a therapist, because a lot of times people just seem to think that it's okay, I can manage, right? I don't need to do that. It's okay, I can function. I have these pains in, the back of my shoulders, but I'll be okay. I'll just do a couple stretches and I'll be fine, right? And not recognizing that these benefits are in place because you have a whole body, right? And all of you needs to get taken care of. Um, and also, to your benefit package is a part of your compensation, right?
Oh, say that twice.
Your benefit package is a part of your compensation. It's like saying, uh, you're getting a job offer and they offer you stock options and you say, oh, I don't need that, forget it. Or, they're offering you a bonus at the end of the year and you say, oh, that's not necessary, right? It's the same thing. Well, it's similar, right? Where if they're offering you these many dollars in orthotics and your feet are on fire, but you think, oh, I'll just get a new pair of runners, it'll be fine, right? Or, many of the big five banks, I'm being told, or even with the federal government here in Canada, they are offering thousands of dollars in therapy support. And people say, oh, that's for people who are in crisis. I don't really need that, right? And it's really important that you tap in because the money goes unclaimed or unused, and it just the next year you'd start over from zero again, right? And so instead of feeling alone, feeling burdened, feeling like you have to navigate it by yourself, you can actually tap into some of those benefits. Get the massage, get your ears checked, get your hearing checked, go get therapy, go see your chiropractor, you know, the pains that you're feeling, get the acupuncture, go to physio, and really take care of yourself so that you can thrive at work, so that you can show up for yourself, so that you can execute those responsibilities and services with with excellence and with vigor, and so that your the people who you report to can say, oh, she really, or he or she really does show up. They really do show up, and so I'm going to, see them in a different position or a higher position, right? And you can just be the best version of yourself that way.
Okay, I want to connect those dots because I think it's really valuable. There is almost a misconception, and I've heard this as well. So many people will save their benefits, especially around physiotherapy and massage, to say, well, what if I was in an accident? It's the what if. Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I heard that noise. And I think the what if is really important because what a lot of people don't realize is that when you regularly go for preventative massage or even with physiotherapy. I go for physiotherapy regularly. I have
Yep,
excellent joints,
yep,
but I have excellent joints because I go to physiotherapy regularly.
right.
And I'm not there for, okay, no offense to everyone who's in physiotherapy. My girlfriend and I nicknamed it electroshock therapy when they put the little pads on you.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah. So that's not the kind that I'm going for. I'm going for more almost like a physical training to go and
Yeah.
work on something specific that might be a little bit stiff or achy, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to work on it together. And what it's brought to me is that I now have more capacity and resilience. I rolled my ankle on a hike and I kept walking. My ankle didn't swell until like the next day because my ankle is used to being moved in all kinds of
Yeah,
different
yeah,
positions.
yeah.
And so when it rolled, it was like, oh, that was not nice. So we paused. I now had my own
Mm-hmm.
techniques that I had learned from my
Mm-hmm.
physiotherapy, did a little bit of self
Yeah.
manipulation, movement. The swelling went down, and off I went on the rest of our hike, right? I didn't even
Mm-hmm.
carry it out. Whereas if you're not going regularly, now you are in crisis.
Yeah.
So tell me about
Yeah.
what you've seen on the mental health side, because you mentioned that people think it's for crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about, what is a session like, or what would that sort of almost, analogy of preventative crisis look like?
Yeah, for sure. So sometimes people come for therapy and they're like, well, nothing major is going on. I'm just curious. I have these benefits. I'd like to use them. And so they come into session. I get to know them a little bit. I ask them, who lives in your home? Do you live alone? What kind of work do you do? How do you make your money? Who are the important people in your life? How did you grow up? I ask about that. I ask about their relationships. And usually, as I'm asking those questions, little threads I realize are a little bit loose, and I start to pull them. And as I pull them, I begin to hear things like, you know, my such and such died when I was 4, and I really never got support for that. Or, my children were placed in care when I was a teenager, and I never got over that. Or, I'm going through a separation and I thought I was okay, and I'm actually not okay. And we start to treat the wounds that they never realized were raw, right? We live in such a world where, when something disturbing and emergent happens to your body, we go into shock, and sometimes we keep going and we don't realize that we're bleeding until someone points it out.
Yeah.
Then you realize just how deep the wound is and how much in pain you actually are, and you can receive treatment for that. And so sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes it's not recognizing the crisis, but recognizing that there has been this parental wound that you've been holding on to for a really long time, and you're carrying this resentment towards a parent and you don't want it there, and we can start to heal some of those pieces. Sometimes it's learning how to set appropriate boundaries. Therapy can really be a great place for what's termed psychoeducation, where you learn about, or you get teaching on, what anxiety looks like, what are some strategies that you can use, how you can have a healthy relationship, how you can be a better parent. Sometimes people come and they just want some tools on parenting. It isn't because they're in crisis, but they're recognizing that the relationship between them and their preteen is starting to get strained. And so I talk to them about, okay, when was the last time you had a hiccup with your preteen? Let's go through that step by step. And I go, oh, okay, I get it. Here's what you could have said differently, or here's where you hand off to your partner. Here is, we talk about some of the hand over hand things, right? And we offer the supports that sometimes people don't realize that they need.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time that we are, as adults, we're always walking around with a childhood version of ourselves. And that child in us always needs parenting. And sometimes they don't realize that. And sometimes they don't know how to offer that inner child the parenting that they need. And so coming to therapy is a really great way of getting some of that self-awareness and getting um, some of that healing that we didn't realize that we need, but also a roadmap on how to navigate the world that we live in.
All right, I want to thank you for giving such practical examples, because I think there's a bit of a myth because it's private. People often don't talk about their therapy session because it's a private session, and they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about things that are hard for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but it's different than going to say, oh, well, my back hurt and I went. And so, I had the electroshock therapy, which is not, by the way, I just want to say it is not, but this idea of, something that doesn't get talked about becomes something that people don't understand,
Right.
and so therefore they avoid.
Right.
Right. Oh, thank
Right.
you for sharing that one.
Mm-hmm.
You talked a little bit more about boundaries, and I want to dig a little bit more into this. So I'm going to give an example of what happened with me. I left an employer. I actually proposed a restructuring. And so I had anticipated that my job would be eliminated, and then just sort of waited for it to happen, which it did. And even though I knew it was coming, and even though I was prepared for it, it still sucked in the
Yeah.
moment, because the way it's designed, literally, when they announce these things to you, they're designed to make you feel very small so that you will not lash out and take
Mm-hmm.
action. And my biggest challenge is I had been with that employer in different capacities over 16 years.
Wow.
And then suddenly wasn't, right? And so it took a while for me to find my own self, not in the title, right? Because I had been the executive director.
Yeah.
And now I wasn't an executive director. And I had been with this employer who was renowned in the community, and now I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, well, actually, I still was, but in a different department, because I had two jobs, and only one of them was eliminated. So I want to leave that with you to talk a little bit about, because I think it's something that's important around this idea of boundaries is also your idea of self.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes I challenge people when they go to a networking event to introduce themselves without their job title, right? Because what tends to happen is that we get very, not to say that you did, but we tend to get very caught with, you know, what the degree says I am, or what the job title says I am, or this role that I've had for the past 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. And then when that gets removed, we have no idea what's going on. We have no, who are we even,
Yeah.
right? If I am not this thing, who am I,
Can I add
right?
to
And so,
that, Roxanne?
yeah,
The prestige of a title.
yes, 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 because we live in a society that's all about the title and the prestige.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really important to create boundaries so that you can really flesh out the other parts of you, right? And even if you are not the title, there are skills that you have that are, sort of universal, right? I am a change maker, whether I work for this organization or that organization, or I am working with women in the community, right? Um, so really take a look at uh, what are what are really character traits for yourself,
Mhm.
right? Flesh those things out, but also who are you when you are having fun? Do you have time for that? Right? Do you have time for rest? Do you have time for fun? Do you have time for joy? Do you do you like to dance? Do you like to sing? Do you like to garden? Do you like to bake? What are some things that are parts of you that are not related to work, right?
Mhm.
We've got to create some of those boundaries so that work ends at a particular time or season, and the rest of you comes out, you know, uh, at a greater force, if you will, during a time and season that's personal to you, so that, regardless of what happens at the job, regardless of what happens at your company, regardless of what happens with entrepreneurship, uh, that part of you still exists, and that part of you can still thrive, and that part of you can still find joy, right? I like to cook, I like to bake, I like to sing, right? And those things are a part of me regardless,
Yeah.
right? And so I would encourage us to create the boundaries that allow us to feed those parts of us, right? But also, sometimes I work with women. Some of my clients are corporate women, and a few of them were getting really, really nervous, saying, we've been on this platform and that platform, and so many people are talking about being let go. What would happen if I get let go? And I said, well, what are your skills? What can you do? If let's imagine that you did get let go tomorrow. Um, how are you showing up in the world that says, you know, these are some of my skills, and these are the things that I can do. And these are some of the things that we need to sometimes pay attention to, not instead of, but alongside of, I am, you know, manager of this group, or I am director of this group, or I work for this company, or I work for that company.
Yeah.
What are some skills that you take with you, even if that company closes the door?
Oh, I really love that. I love all of those examples that you've given. I think it's more valuable than some people imagine to also talk about these things. I mean, I know someone not in my direct circle, but was telling me that they got together with some past colleagues and they did a resume swap, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone took some time, right? Because same thing, they're in the tech industry and they knew that it might be coming, and so everyone said, okay, let me give you a copy of my resume, because if you hear of a position that I might be a good fit for,
Mm.
they could pass it
Yeah.
on. And they also then, have you thought about, and started critiquing. Now this
Mm-hmm.
is a group of guys, right? And
Mm.
I love that they were like really blunt with each other. Let's just exchange resumes, and let's also critique each other's, just to say,
Yeah.
because they'd been hiring managers in the past, and was there something there that you don't see for
Mm-hmm.
yourself? Again, community reflection, right? Let's sharpen each other.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I find that we don't often do that for, as women as much, but we certainly can, and there's room for it, right? We need it. It's that community piece as well.
It is. It's something that I've actually tried to make a practice of for the past
Mm-hmm.
few years. If someone's
Mm-hmm.
applying for a job, do you want to practice some interview questions together?
Yeah.
Do you want me to
Love it.
proofread your resume for you? Have you written a cover
Yeah.
letter? Yes, they are still valid. For those of you listening, they are still valid.
I love that.
And I think it has a lot of merit to it. But so does reflecting on what you do and your journey
Mm-hmm.
and the depth of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring another question to you around
Yeah.
identity, because
Yeah.
it's one that's happened to you and I both. And I sometimes, I don't know if this happens more often to women than it does to men, but I am cisgendered. So I
Yeah.
present as a woman and I was born female. And so I can have someone looking right at me. They know me and they'll be like, listen, Gordon, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, come on, right? And they don't even notice that they've done it.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, I have called you Francis before.
Yeah, that's okay. It happens
I
all
know
the time.
it happens all the time. So tell me more about this, because this is obviously it's happened to you as it has
Yeah.
happened to me.
Yeah.
And my last name is Gordon, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
And it cracks me up every time, to the point where my own manager has called me Gordon before. And then proceeded to just nickname me Gord. And it just,
Oh gosh.
yeah, that was the outcome. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, it's part of it is, I think, is probably my fault, because I put my last name at the front of my business, so it's Francis Psychotherapy, and everyone just assumes that that's my first name, and I just very gently correct, um, because it's your name, and I think it's how you uh, it's very important, right? How we address ourselves. It's a part of our identity. And so if someone says to me, I would prefer to be called this instead of that, then I adhere to that, because that's how they see themselves, and how you see yourself in the world is huge, right? And it's important to treat that with respect and the utmost care. We have to take a look at who we are, and not just by name, but how we show up, um, how we, I can't put away the psychotherapist hat, but how we were treated in childhood, in our early adulthood, all those things inform how we see ourselves. There's a phrase that I like to use is that, how we were spoken to in childhood becomes our inside voice in our adulthood. And so we have to be mindful of those pieces. And so not just how are we presenting ourselves, but how are we speaking to ourselves? That's a huge piece when it comes to identity. Who are we around? Because the people that we're around, they're speaking into our lives. They are shaping our reality.
Mm-hmm.
There's a phrase that says your network is your net worth, right? And so we really need to pay attention to that as well, because that shapes your identity. Um, and so if you are finding that you feel like you can't show up as your authentic self, if you're struggling with your self-esteem or your self-confidence, some things to look at are, how am I speaking to myself? What are the things that I'm telling myself? What are the things that I believe about me to be true? And who is speaking into my life? What am I reading? What am I consuming? Because that definitely impacts your identity and how you show up.
Yeah.
It impacts your belief about who you can be in this world. It impacts your belief about your capacity, whether or not there's a ceiling on your potential. Um, it all of that pours into identity and how we show up. And so it's really important to pay attention to that.
Oh, I really like those examples. And I think about what that can actually look like, because I had a cousin. I grew up knowing her as Ida.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly she got this job and she became Ida. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what
happened?
okay. What happened here? And no one at work would pronounce her name correctly. And so she just gave up, and she
Wow.
changed her name to accommodate.
Wow.
Right. So when you talk about what that looks like, think about that. Your name, your identity, yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with sort of, the gentle, my name is.
Mm-hmm.
But this is also many years ago, at a time when it was less
Right.
prominent, that people would just speak over you. And
Right.
well,
Right.
I'm not going to call you
Yeah.
that. And that was somehow acceptable at work. And thankfully, I'm starting to see a shift that it's not.
Mm.
So I want to say in our final words together, because oh my gosh, my friend, our time has flown by.
I know.
What are some words that you want to leave us with? Things that you've seen as things that either we can do to elevate ourselves, in the sense of either protecting ourselves or lifting ourselves up in a
Yeah.
workplace,
Yeah.
or things that you're seeing as a change in the workplace that we could be aware of, so that we can more fully
Yeah.
participate.
Yes. So some things that I often encourage people to do is pay attention to the people around you who are succeeding, right? Oftentimes in our social media culture, we tend to look at people who are succeeding and we tend to get jealous, or we tend to fall in this comparison trap. And I often say, pay attention to your jealousy because it's pointing to where you would like to be. It isn't there just so you can have this green-eyed kind of, kind of envious demeanor, but really it's showing you that's actually the life that I want. That's actually the lifestyle that I want. I want that position, or I want that degree, or whatever it is. So instead of getting very upset, ask yourself what's going on here. Is that actually something that I want? And if it is, try to find the steps to go get it, right? You don't need to sit there in discomfort because someone else has something that you want. We live in a world of possibilities. The other thing that I would say is when you see people around you who are succeeding, pay attention to the things that they're doing, right? Some people are succeeding because they're doing some kind of unscrupulous things, but we won't go in that direction, right? We will go in the direction of, what are they reading? What are they listening to? What are their work? What are their habits like? Do they get up and go for a walk in the morning? Maybe morning's not the time for you, but maybe during lunch or after dinner. Pay attention to some of these things because that can really yield some fruit in your life.
Mhm.
Also, what are you consuming? It's something that I am truly a believer in. There are so many books and podcasts and Instagram lives, right? And social media accounts that are fruitful and helpful and positive and can give you so much information, things that you can action right now, or maybe action in a month or two when you get a few ducks in a row. Pay attention to some of these things. Pay attention to what you're consuming because it can really shift your perspective.
Mm.
The other thing that I would pay attention to is your really, I guess I wouldn't be doing myself any favors if I didn't say pay attention to your mental health, right? Are you, and when I say your mental health, a lot of people ask, how will I know if I need support? How do I know if my mental health is in the toilet? How do I know if I'm just having a sad day, or if I'm actually going down the road of depression? How do I know if I'm just really nervous or if I have anxiety? So pay attention to trends, right? If you are um, having difficulty sleeping when you've always fallen asleep on a regular basis, if you're suddenly sleeping 15, 16 hours a day when that was not the trend,
Yeah.
if your diet has changed, if you suddenly have no appetite and that's never been the case, if you're suddenly eating everything in sight and there isn't a physically medical explanation for that, right? If you find yourself worrying about things all the time, worrying about all kinds of things, asking yourself what if, and being fearful, this is something to pay attention to, right? If people around you have noticed that you are not going out of your house anymore, that you don't engage in the things that you used to anymore, sometimes we get really irritated by their noticing, oh, leave me alone. But really, I want you to stop and think about it and reach out to your doctor and ask some questions because some of these things can be explained by a medical issue. But if it's not a medical issue, I would encourage you to seek some support. Um, Try to live a balanced life as much as possible. It's not always easy, but we live in a very stressful world, right? And so there's a lot of stress on this end. What can we do to even it up on the other side? What are some things that you're doing in your life that are joyful, that bring you ease, that bring you rest, that bring you peace?
Oh, they
Try
bring
to
you
pursue those.
gratitude.
And
Yeah.
gratitude. Yeah, I would try to pursue those.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of this. I'm so glad we're recording. Roxanne, thank you for your time today. Thank you for
Of
coming to
course.
share your wisdom. Thank you for your practicality and all of the wonderful examples that you've given at a very personal level and at a very tangible level of expectation and as well as things that people can really take away. So thank you for that, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Brooke.
You are so welcome. I look forward to continuing our voice notes, and you and I are
Yeah.
going to meet in person soon.
Yes, we must.
And everyone who's been listening, thank you so much for joining us on the Best for Women Live podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Gordon. You've been listening to Roxanne Francis from Francis Psychotherapy. If you drop down into the notes of this show, you'll see all of her contact information there. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.